Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into one of the new subclasses in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. If you are an Undead Warlock, you have made a pact with a deathless being, one who defies the life and death cycle to eternally pursue their unfathomable ambition. Some of the creatures that you may have made a pact with is a very powerful vampire, or maybe a demi-lich or draco-lich, or even an undead pharaoh. And in making this pact, at first level, you get an expanded list of spell choices that you can pick as part of your warlock spells. Now, there are some really good spells in here that are extremely useful, like Greater Invisibility. Cloud Kill is really nice. However, there is also Phantom Steed, which can be a real blunder if you're using your warlock spell slots to cast that spell. Now, while I think all of these spells are super flavorful for the Undead Warlock and exactly what I would want, I think Death Ward is really awesome, even though it's similar to a later level ability, which we'll get to. But also Speak with Dead, I would totally want an Undead Warlock to have that. The only problem here is that a lot of these spells cannot be upcast. So if I have 5th level spells as a Warlock, and I'm casting a 3rd level Speak with Dead, then I'm gonna be feeling a little ineffective and like I wasted that spell slot, and that's not what you want to be feeling when you're a warlock because you have so few of them. Also at first level, you get Form of Dread, which means you have the ability to transform yourself for 1 minute as a bonus action. In doing so, you get the following benefits. You gain a number of temporary hit points equal to 1d10 plus your warlock level. Additionally, when you hit a creature with an attack roll once per turn, you can force it to make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened of you until the end of your next turn. Additionally, you are immune to the frightened condition. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. And you can also have your undead form look however you want as appropriate to your patron. So before we dive into the pros and cons of this feature, I want to take a look at the frightened condition because this class deals with it quite a bit. So if a creature is frightened, then it has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks while the source of the frightened condition is within line of sight. Additionally, the creature can also not move any closer to the source as long as it is frightened. So now let's dive into the ability. The 1d10 plus warlock level temporary hit points is immensely good at early levels, though the later you get, it's a little bit more of diminishing returns. Because 1d10 plus 1 could be 11 hit points at first level, which could be well over the number of hit points that you have. However, once you're at 5th level, your hit point pool is going to be a lot larger. And that's not to say 1d10 plus 5 at 5th level is not good at all, because it is. An extra 15 or even 6 hit points can really do some work. However, that is something to keep in mind. It's going to feel less and less powerful as time goes on in your warlock career. So now let's take a look at that wisdom save frightened condition. I think this is a really cool ability, and it lends itself to a blaster type cleric really well. When I shoot off an Eldritch Blast, I can try to frighten the target with this feature, meaning that not only can it not move any closer to me, but it also has disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. So even if it tries to fight its way out, it's going to be really bad at that. Or if it needs to climb away, then maybe an athletics check it has to make is now really lackluster. Most of us know that a disadvantage incurring type effect is really powerful in D&D. I think the math shakes out to something like -5 to an ability check or attack roll. I also like the fact that it's until the end of your next turn. I think that extra little time, having that extra turn to be able to interact with this effect is really good, and it can open a lot of creative solutions trying to incur an ability check for the creature, or just biding time to frighten it again, or let your allies get out of an attack of opportunity range with it, because even if it takes an attack of opportunity, it's at disadvantage now. That being said, however, there is a large number of creatures that are immune to the Frightened condition. I believe right now it's 112 creatures within all the source books that are completely immune to Frightened, so you're not going to be able to get this ability off on them. The next part of this feature is that you yourself are immune to the Frightened condition. And we already talked about how good Frightened can be in the heat of battle, and now while your form of dread is up, you don't have to worry about that, and it's extra layer of protection. That's always nice. Next, at 6th level, you get the Grave Touch feature. As part of this feature, you don't have to eat, drink, or sleep anymore, which is super nice. And also, whenever you hit a creature with an attack and damage roll, you can change that damage type to Necrotic and also roll an additional damage die as part of that damage. Something to note, however, is that it is only once per turn. However, this is really good for warlocks. If you're a blaster warlock, when you're shooting that Eldritch Blast, you can deal an extra D10 on top of the D10 that you were already dealing. However, this changes that force damage, which is a really good damage type, to Necrotic to add that extra D10. Now, if you're a Pact of the Blade Warlock and you're dealing more with melee weapons, then a Great Axe would be really good for you because it doesn't say a specific size to the damage die, it just adds one of the type that you're already dealing. So if you have a Great Axe, you're dealing 1d12 damage. So now, instead of 1d12 slashing damage, you're dealing 2d12 necrotic damage, which could be really good for you. My favorite part about this feature is that it doesn't really interact with your form of dread, but it synergizes with it really well. It's not dependent on you having form of dread up, but if you do have form of dread up, not only are you dealing that extra damage, but you're also potentially incurring the frightened condition every single round, which is super powerful. Our 10th level feature is Necrotic Husk. You gain resistance to necrotic damage. If you're transformed, instead you gain immunity to necrotic damage. Additionally, if you would be dropped to 0 hit points, you can use your reaction and drop to 1 hit point instead. And in doing so, you erupt in deathly energy. You deal an amount of damage equal to 2d10 plus your warlock level to every creature of your choice within 30 feet of you. Once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish 1d4 long rests, and you gain 1 level of exhaustion. Now there's a lot going on here. First off, that resistance that's always on is really nice, and I like that it synergizes with your form of dread by making it immunity when you have that transformation active. Once again, it's not completely dependent on you having that form of dread ready and active. It's still giving you a benefit, but the benefit is a little bit more when you have that form of dread active, and I really like that design choice. Additionally, that effect to choose not to die in burst in necrotic energy is really, really cool, and it's dealing a lot of damage not to shake a stick at, and you can choose your allies to be safe and only deal damage to enemies. However, when you do it, you do gain a point of exhaustion, which in of itself I think is totally fine. I think it's super flavorful and a appropriate cost to the ability. However, additionally, you can't do so again until you finish 1d4 long rests. And I don't particularly like that part as much. If I were to try to fix this, I would totally strike the 1d4 long rests and say that you can use it again after a short rest. That would prevent PCs from never going down, just popping it and popping it. However, it makes the level of exhaustion be the limiter. Because if you're rolling 1d4 long rests, especially if it's 3 or 4 long rests, you're probably going to shed that exhaustion easy peasy. However, if you're popping this ability more and more, even though it's harder to go down, the more and more exhaustion that you incur, the more danger you're putting yourself in, and the more close to instant death you're putting yourself. And I think that's a far more dramatic and interesting level of limitation than just saying, you can't do it for another, couple days. And if that might be too powerful to keep popping it only at the cost of 1 exhaustion, maybe you can say it costs 2 levels of exhaustion. Or maybe you roll a d4 and then it's kind of random and interesting. Or perhaps you just lower the damage it deals or the radius it deals it in. There's a lot of different ways I could have seen them go with this, and I'm a little sad that there's this arbitrary limit onto how many times you can do it. Next, at 14th level, you get Spirit Projection. As an action, you can project yourself spiritually, leaving your unconscious body behind. You look exactly the same to your mortal self, however, you do leave any possessions behind. And this lasts for an hour or until concentration is broken, as if concentrating on a spell. Additionally, when this projection ends, your spirit returns to your body, or your body is shunted to your spirit, your choice. When you are projecting your spirit, you gain the following benefits. Both your spirit and body gain resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage. Additionally, when you cast a spell of necromancy or conjuration, you do not have to satisfy the somatic and verbal components and any material components that lack a gold cost. Also, you have a flying speed equal to your walking speed with which you can hover, and you can move through walls and objects and creatures as if it was difficult terrain. However, if you end your turn inside any of those things, you do take 1d10 force damage. Also, while you are using Form of Dread, once per turn when you deal damage using necrotic damage, you can choose to gain a number of hit points equal to half that necrotic damage. And once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. So this is your last Warlock ability, and there is a lot going on here, and I think it's a really cool ability. It's incredible for exploration. Being able to move through walls and shunt your body to your spiritual form is not only good for scouting, but total infiltration as well. Being to fly up somewhere for an hour is a really powerful ability, which is probably why it was limited to basically once per day, being once per long rest. Additionally, being able to gain those hit points, really interacting with your Form of Dread, and your 6th level ability, Grave Touched, is really cool and really powerful. It's also important to know that unlike a lot of mechanics in D&D, if you end your turn inside a wall or another creature, you don't get pushed out. A lot of times you get shunted out of that wall or creature's space and take damage in addition to it. However, you can stay there and continue your movement only at the cost of 1d10, which is very interesting to note. Now, I do really like this last feature. Being able to project your spirit is incredibly powerful in almost every stage of the game. And I also like that your body also gets that resistance, so concentration can better be held if something's attacking your body. I think it's overall a really cool ability. However, I'm not convinced that if you were a Pact of the Blade Warlock and you were trying to use this feature, that your weapons would come with you, because it does say that any possessions are left behind. So if you were trying for that build, I don't think there's a lot of support 14th level and beyond. So that is it for the Undead Warlock, and I'm really excited about this one. I don't think it's the best Warlock out there. I do think that others are a little bit better, but it is a really strong candidate, and I do welcome it into my games, and I'm excited to play one myself. Being a big fan of Warlocks, they're my absolute favorite class. Overall, I think this class is really well designed. I'm really happy with all the synergy that's going on here without being too reliant on limited resources. I like that they decided to do things once per turn, rather than, a number of times equal to your charisma modifier, or only so many times per your proficiency bonus per long rest. I really like that it's like once per turn, I can always rely on this ability, and they interact with each other. I think Form of Dread scales pretty well with your proficiency bonus, and even though I would like to see the spiritual projection come up more than once per long rest, I do understand that they shoved so much power into it that you do have to kind of limit it to a daily kind of effect. However, the other ones synergize so well together that I'm totally okay with that. If I were to rank this warlock among the other warlocks, I would give this one a 4 spirit boards out of 5. I think it's really solid, but it's just shy of being one of the top dogs. So what do you think? Go ahead and leave your comments down below. I'm really excited about this class, but I haven't heard a lot about what the community thinks of it, so I would love to hear your thoughts. If you've gotten this far in the video, I just wanted to say thank you so much. You've already done so much to help the channel, and I appreciate you watching. Before I leave, however, I just wanted to say a super, super big thank you to our May patrons, Faizan Ahmad, Robert Allen Klaus III, and Painted Sky. Thank you guys so much for supporting us on Patreon. It means the absolute world to us. Otherwise, till next time, we hope to see you on your next short rest.